Title: No Mercy Left. Chapter 1. The wind cut across the Kansas plains like a knife, carrying the scent of rain that never quite fell. Elias Crow sat alone on his porch, a half-empty bottle of whiskey in his hand, watching the sun bleed out behind the horizon. His hands, once steady enough to drop a man at 200 yards, now shook with every sip. 10 years had passed since he rode with the old gang. 10 years since he swore he'd never pick up a gun again. A promise made to a dying woman who believed he could still be saved. He almost believed it himself, until the day a stranger rode up asking for a killer. The stranger was young, barely out of his teens, with dust on his coat and fear in his eyes. He stopped his horse a respectful distance from the porch, hat in hand. "They say you're the man who can do what needs doing," he said, voice cracking. "My sister's been taken, not by outlaws, by the law itself. Sheriff over in Willow Creek locked her up for something she didn't do. They're gonna hang her come Friday." Elias didn't move, didn't even look up. "Wrong man, son. I don't ride anymore." The boy stepped closer. "They say you killed 15 men, that you once burned a whole town just to settle a debt." "Stories," Elias muttered. "Stories get bigger with every telling. The truth is uglier and smaller. Now ride on, I got nothing for you." But as the boy turned to leave, Elias caught the glint of something familiar in those desperate eyes, the same look he'd worn himself once. He took another pull from the bottle and felt the old darkness stir, like an animal waking from a long sleep. The boy's horse pawed at the dirt, impatient. "They're saying she stole from the bank, but I know she didn't. She was just in the wrong place. The sheriff's got a grudge against our family. If she hangs, it's blood on his hands, and I aim to make him pay." Elias finally lifted his gaze, the whiskey bottle frozen halfway to his lips. He studied the kid's face, the way his jaw clenched, the tremor in his hands. It was like looking in a cracked mirror. "Paying with blood don't fix nothing," he said quietly. "It just spreads the stain." Still, when the boy didn't ride away, Elias felt it, that old pull, like a rope tightening around his chest. He set the bottle down with a soft clink. "What's your sister's name?" "Lily," the boy answered, hope flickering in his voice. Elias closed his eyes. Lily. The name twisted something in him he thought was long dead. He stood slowly, bones creaking, and walked inside without another word. When he came back out, he was carrying a gun belt he hadn't touched in years. The leather was stiff, the holster worn smooth from old use. He didn't strap it on, not yet, but the weight of it in his hands felt like coming home to a house he'd burned down himself. The stranger watched, eyes wide, as Elias buckled the belt around his waist with slow, deliberate hands. The gun slid into place like it had never left. "You'll do it?" the boy asked, voice barely above a whisper. Elias stared at the darkening sky. "I'll ride to Willow Creek, see what's what, but I make no promises beyond that." He stepped off the porch, boots crunching gravel. The boy offered his hand. "Name's Caleb." Elias ignored it. "Names don't matter where we're going. Saddle up, we ride at first light." He turned back toward the house, the old door creaking as he pushed it open. Inside, the walls held ghosts, faded photographs, a woman's shawl still draped over a chair. He paused, hand on the frame, feeling the weight of every promise he'd broken. Then he shut the door behind him, leaving the night to swallow the last light. Chapter 2. They rode in silence for most of the day, the Kansas sun beating down like judgment. By noon, the flatlands gave way to rolling hills, and Willow Creek appeared in the distance, a cluster of weathered buildings huddled along a muddy river. Elias kept his hat low, eyes scanning every rooftop and alley. He'd learned long ago that towns like this had teeth. Caleb rode a few paces behind, nervous energy crackling off him. "Sheriff's name is Harlan Crow. No relation, I hope." Elias didn't smile. Crow's a common enough name. As they crossed the wooden bridge into town, a deputy stepped out from the jailhouse, shotgun resting easy across his arms. He took one look at Elias and froze. Recognition hit like a slap. "Well, I'll be damned," the deputy muttered. "They said you were dead." Elias reined in his horse. They were half right. His voice was quiet, but the whole street seemed to hear it. Shutters clicked open. Faces appeared in windows. In less than a minute, Willow Creek knew the devil had come back to collect. The deputy lowered his shotgun a fraction, but his knuckles stayed white around the stock. "You got no business here, Crow. Town's been quiet since you left. Best keep it that way." Elias swung down from the saddle, slow and deliberate, boots thudding on the boardwalk. "I'm here for the girl, Lily. Open the cell." The deputy's laugh came out shaky. "That little thief, she's got a date with the rope come Friday. Judge's orders. You ride in here thinking you can just..." Caleb stepped forward, fists clenched. "She didn't steal anything and you know it." Before the deputy could answer, the jailhouse door swung open. Sheriff Harlan Crow stepped out, thumbs hooked in his gun belt, star glinting on his chest. He looked Elias up and down like he was measuring a coffin. "Been a long time, brother." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Heard you turned farmer. Soft." Elias felt the old rage stir, cold and familiar. "Let the girl go, Harlan. This ain't her fight." Harlan's smile widened. "Everything's my fight in this town, and you're 10 years too late to start making rules again." The two brothers stared at each other across the dusty street, the air thick enough to choke on. Sheriff Harlan's hand rested casual-like on his holster, but Elias saw the tension in his shoulders, the same tension that used to mean someone was about to die. "10 years ago you left me holding the bag," Harlan said, voice low so only Elias could hear. "Took the money, took the glory, left me to explain to the posse why half the gang was swinging from ropes. Now you show up for some girl you don't even know?" "She's innocent," Elias answered. Harlan chuckled. "Innocence got nothing to do with it. This town needs an example, and her neck's as good as any." He nodded toward the jail window, where a pale face watched from behind the bars. "You want her? Earn her. Same way we used to." Elias's fingers twitched near his gun. Caleb shifted nervously beside him. The whole street had gone dead quiet, waiting for the first move. Harlan turned to go back inside. "You got till sundown tomorrow to change my mind. After that, rope goes tight. Your choice, little brother." The door slammed shut behind him, leaving Elias standing in the dust with the weight of every bad decision he'd ever made pressing down on his shoulders. Chapter 3. Night fell hard on Willow Creek, bringing a cold wind that rattled every loose shutter in town. Elias stood alone on the roof of the livery stable, watching the jailhouse like a wolf studying a trap. The single lantern burning inside painted long shadows across the barred window where Lily sat, head bowed. Caleb climbed up beside him, boots scraping softly. "What's the plan? There ain't one yet," Elias muttered. "Your sister's locked in a steel cage with 2 armed men between her and the door. Harlan's always been careful. Then we shoot our way in, you and me, like the old days." Elias turned, eyes hard. Old days got a lot of men killed, including your kind of men, the ones who thought bravery was enough. He looked back at the jail. This town's got eyes everywhere. If we move wrong, they'll hang her just to spite me. A match flared below them as a deputy lit a cigarette under the jail porch. The orange glow lit his face for a second, long enough for Elias to recognize him, one of the men who'd ridden with them years ago. The man who used to laugh at Harlan's jokes while bodies piled up. Elias's voice dropped to a whisper. "First we talk to the only person in this town who might still owe me a favor. Then we see if mercy's still a word anyone here understands. The livery roof creaked under their weight as they eased down the ladder. Elias led the way through the back alleys, keeping to shadows that smelled of horse piss and rotting hay. They slipped behind the saloon, where piano music leaked through the walls like cheap whiskey. He stopped at a narrow door half hidden by a rain barrel. 3 soft knocks, then 2 more. The door cracked open. A woman's face appeared, older now, lines around her eyes that time had carved deep. Elias Crow, she breathed, like saying it might summon the devil. I heard you were back. Should have known you'd find me. Need a favor, Rose, he said quietly. Same kind you gave me once when I was bleeding out in your barn. She glanced past him at Caleb, then opened the door wider. Come in before someone sees you. Harlan's got ears in every wall. Inside, the small room smelled of lavender and gun oil. Rose shut the door, bolted it, then turned to face him. You here for the girl? Elias nodded. Rose's laugh was bitter. That girl's the only thing keeping this town honest. Harlan needs her hanging to cover his own theft from the bank. You ride in here trying to save her, you're liable to get every innocent soul in Willow Creek killed right alongside her. She stepped closer, voice dropping, including me. Rose crossed the room, poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a tin cup, and slid it across the table toward Elias. Her hands trembled just enough to betray her calm. Harlan's been skimming from the bank for years. Your girl Lily found the ledger. That's why she's in that cell, not because she stole anything. Elias didn't touch the whiskey. How do I get her out without burning this town down? You don't, Rose said flatly. Not tonight. Harlan's got 3 deputies inside that jail, and he sleeps with the key around his neck. But tomorrow night, there's a town meeting at the church. Everyone will be there, including him. That's your only window. Caleb leaned forward. We could rush the jail while they're praying. Rose shook her head. You rush that jail, those deputies shoot first and ask questions never. But if you're smart, you use what this town fears most. She looked Elias dead in the eye. They still tell stories about you, Elias, about the man who once cleared an entire saloon with 6 bullets. Make them remember why they used to cross the street when they saw you coming. Elias stared into the cup, watching the lamplight dance on the whiskey. The old darkness stirred again, whispering that some doors, once opened, never closed again. Chapter 4. Dawn broke grey and ugly over Willow Creek, the kind of light that made every sin look worse. Elias stood at the edge of town where the prairie met the first buildings, rolling a cigarette he didn't intend to smoke. Caleb paced beside him like a caged animal. You heard Rose, Caleb said. We got 1 chance tonight. We need more men. Elias struck a match, watched the flame dance between his fingers. More men means more graves. I ain't dragging strangers into this. Then what? We just sit here waiting for them to hang my sister? Elias exhaled smoke toward the rising sun. We make them scared. Fear does more work than bullets ever could. He crushed the cigarette under his boot. You're gonna walk into that saloon at noon. Tell every man in there that Elias Crow is back, and he's come to collect what's owed. Then you get out before they ask questions. Caleb's face went pale. And what'll you be doing? Elias's voice went quiet, almost gentle, reminding this town what my name used to mean. He turned and walked toward the stable without another word, the weight of the gun on his hip feeling lighter than it had any right to. The old wolf was waking up, and for the first time in 10 years, it didn't feel like a curse. It felt like coming home. The stable smelled of leather and horse sweat. Elias moved through the shadows until he found what he was looking for, an old duster coat hanging on a nail, stiff with dust and time. He shook it out, the fabric whispering like it remembered him. When he slipped it on, the weight settled on his shoulders like an old sin he'd never quite outrun. spent the next hour in the loft, oiling his gun in silence, each stroke of the rag bringing back faces he'd tried to forget. Men he'd killed, men he'd buried, promises he'd broken. The metal gleamed cold and unforgiving when he was done. By the time the church bells rang for noon, he was ready. He stepped out into the bright sunlight, coat flapping like a black flag. The street went still. A woman dropped her basket and crossed herself. Two old men on a bench froze mid-conversation, mouths open. Elias walked straight down the center of the street, boots loud on the boardwalk, eyes fixed on the saloon doors. He didn't need to say a word. The fear rolling off him was louder than any speech. Behind him, Caleb slipped into the saloon, just like he'd been told. Inside, every head turned. Caleb's voice cracked but carried. Elias Crow is back, and he ain't here to talk. The piano stopped mid-note, glasses hit the bar, and in that sudden silence, the whole town remembered why they used to pray Elias Crow stayed gone. Elias kept walking, slow and steady, until he stood right in front of the jailhouse. He didn't draw his gun. He didn't need to. The two deputies inside watched him through the window like men staring at their own coffin. Sheriff Harlan stepped out onto the porch, thumbs hooked in his belt, trying to look casual, but Elias saw the bead of sweat running down his brother's temple. Making a show, little brother? This ain't the old days. These people got laws now. Elias looked past him, straight through the open door to where Lily stood gripping the bars, eyes wide with something between hope and terror. Laws, he said quietly. Don't hang innocent girls to cover up bank theft. Harlan's face twitched. Careful. Accusations like that can get a man shot. Or hanged, Elias answered. Come Friday. For a long second, neither man moved. The whole street held its breath. Then Harlan laughed, too loud, too forced. Enjoy your little parade, Elias. Come sundown tomorrow, that rope's still gonna tighten. He turned and slammed the door, but not before Elias caught the tremor in his hand. Elias stood there a moment longer, letting the fear sink into every watching eye. Then he turned and walked away, coat snapping in the wind like the wings of something that had finally remembered how to fly. Elias pushed through the saloon doors just after Caleb. The room went graveyard quiet, cards frozen mid-play, bottles halfway to lips. 20 men stared at him like he was the reaper come to collect. He walked straight to the bar, voice low and clear. Harlan Crow's been stealing from your bank. That girl in his jail found out. That's why he's hanging her Friday, not because she took a dime. A big man in a miner's coat stood up slow. That's a serious charge against the sheriff. Elias met his eyes. It's the truth. And every man in this room who's got money in that bank just lost it to my brother's pocket. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few hands drifted toward guns. The barkeep's rag stopped moving. Elias didn't raise his voice. I ain't here to kill nobody tonight. But come tomorrow night, when that church bell rings, I'm opening that jail. Any man who stands with Harlan is standing against every dollar you got left. Your choice. He turned to leave. Behind him, Caleb stood frozen, face white. As the doors swung shut, the first angry voices broke out inside. The town wasn't scared anymore. It was waking up. Chapter 5. The church bell rang for the town meeting at 8 sharp. Every lantern in Willow Creek burned bright, turning the streets gold, while shadows pooled deep between buildings. Elias waited on the stable roof, rifle across his knees, watching the townsfolk file into the white clapboard church like lambs to a sermon they didn't know was about them. Caleb crouched beside him, breathing fast. Rose said half the men in there are carrying. What if they turn on us? They won't, Elias said. Not after what I told them in the saloon. Greed's a stronger rope than fear. He checked the loads in his rifle one last time. When that door opens and they come out, You slip down the back alley to the jail. I'll keep their eyes on me." The meeting ran long, voices rising and falling like a storm building. Elias could pick out Harlan's smooth baritone cutting through the noise, feeding them the same lies he'd always sold. Then the doors burst open. Men spilled out shouting, fists in the air, faces lit with righteous anger. Elias stood up where they could all see him, black coat flapping against the night sky. The crowd froze mid-step. For 3 heartbeats nobody moved. Then a single voice from the back yelled, "He's right! Harlan's been robbing us blind!" The mob turned as one toward the jailhouse. Elias smiled in the dark, thin and cold. The wolf had finally slipped its chain. Chapter 6. The mob surged down the street like floodwater, lanterns swinging, voices roar with betrayal. Elias stayed on the roof, watching from above as the tide broke against the jailhouse steps. Harlan's deputies stepped outside, shotguns raised, but they looked small against 30 angry men. "Sheriff's inside," someone shouted. "Drag him out." Elias dropped from the roof into the alley, boots silent in the dirt. He moved fast along the back wall, Caleb right behind him. Rose was already there, a ring of keys glinting in her hand. "Back door," she whispered, sliding the key into the lock. Harlan's still inside, trying to talk them down. "You've got maybe 2 minutes." The door swung open with a groan. Lily looked up from her cot, face pale in the lantern light. For a second, nobody spoke. Then Elias stepped forward. "Come on, girl. Time to go." Lily stood on shaky legs. "You're him. The one they're all yelling about." "No time for names," Elias said, taking her arm. They slipped out the back just as the front door splintered open under the weight of the crowd. Shouts turned to gunshots. A deputy screamed. Rose grabbed Caleb's sleeve. "Ride north, all of you. Don't stop till sunup." Elias looked back once at the chaos swallowing the jailhouse. His brother's town was burning itself down from the inside, and he'd struck the match. The old darkness felt almost like justice tonight. Almost. They ran hard through the back alleys, Lily stumbling between them, her breathing ragged. Gunfire cracked behind them like fireworks from hell, each shot lighting up the night for a split second. Elias kept one hand on Lily's arm, guiding her over a low fence and into the open prairie. "Keep moving. Don't look back." Caleb glanced over his shoulder, eyes wide. "They're killing each other back there." "That's their fight now," Elias said. "Ours is staying alive." Rose caught up, breathing hard, a saddlebag slung over her shoulder. "Horses are tied at the old oak, half a mile north. I put food and water in the bags. You ride straight for the border. Harlan won't forgive this." They reached the oak just as the church steeple caught fire, orange flames licking the sky like the devil laughing. Lily swung up behind Caleb. Elias took the last horse, turning it north with a sharp kick. As they galloped into the dark, Rose stood watching them go, one hand raised in farewell. Elias didn't wave back. He'd just torn open the past and let it swallow an entire town. Mercy was long gone, and whatever came next was going to be soaked in blood. He only hoped Lily's life was worth the price. Chapter 7. They rode through the night until the horses' sides heaved and foam flecked their necks. Only then did Elias slow them to a walk under a stand of cottonwoods by a shallow creek. The fire from Willow Creek still painted the southern sky a dull orange, like the town itself was bleeding out. Lily slid off the horse on shaky legs and dropped to her knees by the water, cupping her hands to drink. Elias watched her in silence, the girl's thin frame trembling in the cold. 10 years of trying to forget who he was, and one desperate kid had dragged him right back into the fire. Caleb paced, rifle in his hands. "They'll come after us. Harlan won't let this go." "He will when he's dead," Elias said quietly. He knelt beside Lily, offered her his canteen. You okay, girl? She looked up at him, eyes fierce despite the fear. I saw the ledger, every name, every dollar he stole. If I die, that proof dies with me. Elias nodded once. Then we make sure you don't die. He stood, wiping his hands on his coat. We rest 2 hours, then we ride again. The border's still 3 days off, and Harlan rides faster than guilt. He walked a few paces away, staring back at the burning sky. The old wolf wasn't just awake now, it was hungry. And for the first time, Elias wondered if saving one innocent life was worth feeding it everything he'd tried to bury. Lily stood up slowly, water dripping from her hands. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. Elias didn't turn around. Because 10 years ago I rode with men who did the same thing your sheriff's doing. Took what wasn't theirs and called it justice. I watched them hang a boy no older than your brother for less than what you did. Caleb stopped pacing. You never told me that. Didn't see the point, Elias said. Some stories only make the listener hate you more. He finally faced them, face carved hard by firelight. But I made a promise to a woman before she died that I'd never ride that road again. Looks like promises don't mean much when blood's on the line. A low wind moved through the cottonwoods, carrying distant shouts from the direction of town. Elias tilted his head, listening. They're forming a posse. We've got maybe an hour before they pick up our trail. Lily stepped closer. Then let me help. I know Harlan's routes. I know where he keeps his extra horses. If we're smart, we can make him chase his own shadow instead of us. Elias studied her for a long moment, seeing something in her eyes that reminded him too much of himself at that age. All right, girl, you just bought yourself a seat at the table. But remember this, once you start playing this game, the only way out is through a grave. Lily wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and pointed northeast. There's an old line shack, 2 hours that way. Harlan keeps spare horses there for his deputies. If we take them, his posse will be riding tired mounts while we switch to fresh ones. Elias gave a short nod. Good. That buys us time. He swung back into the saddle, then reached down and pulled Lily up behind him. Hold tight. We ride quiet now. No talking. Caleb mounted up beside them, jaw set. The 3 horses moved out at a steady trot, hooves muffled by the tall grass. The burning town was just aglow on the horizon now, but the sound of distant hoofbeats was growing. Half an hour later, the line shack appeared, a low, dark shape against the stars. Elias raised his hand and they stopped. He slid from the saddle, rifle ready. Stay here, I'll clear it. He moved forward alone, melting into the shadows like he was born to them. The shack door hung open. Inside, 2 horses stamped nervously in their stalls. No guards. Harlan had pulled every man into the hunt. Elias led the fresh horses out, their shoes wrapped in strips of blanket to silence them. He handed one set of reins to Caleb. We change mounts every 30 miles. We don't stop again till the sun's up. And if anybody falls behind... He looked at both of them, eyes flat and cold. We don't stop. Chapter 8. The sun rose red and angry, turning the prairie into a sea of blood. Elias kept them riding through the heat, switching horses twice before noon. Lily's arms stayed locked around his waist, her breathing steady against his back. She hadn't complained once. By mid-afternoon, they reached the edge of the Badlands, where the grass gave way to cracked red earth and jagged rocks. Elias reined in at the mouth of a narrow canyon. We'll rest here. Shade's better than nothing. Caleb dropped from his horse and immediately started checking the animal's legs. Lily slid down and stretched, wincing. How much farther to the border? 2 more days if we push hard, Elias said. He scanned the horizon behind them. Dust plumes, faint but steady, still followed. Harlan's closer than I'd like. Lily walked to the canyon wall and sat in the thin strip of shade. You and him? You're really brothers? Elias sat across from her, back against warm stone. Same mother, different fathers. He always hated that I was faster with a gun, said it made me think I was better. He gave a dry laugh. Turns out he was right about that part. A rifle shot cracked in the distance, too far to be aimed at them, but close enough to tighten every nerve. Elias stood slowly. They've picked up our trail again. Mount up. We're riding through the night. He looked at Lily, something almost gentle in his voice. You ready for that, girl? She met his eyes without flinching. I've been ready since they locked me in that cell. Caleb was already tightening cinches. Elias felt the old weight settle back on his shoulders. The border was still 2 days away, and every mile was going to cost them something they couldn't get back. Elias took the lead into the canyon, guiding his horse between the narrow rock walls, while the others followed single file. The rifle shot they'd heard earlier echoed again, closer this time, bouncing off stone like it was hunting them. Keep moving, Elias muttered. Don't stop for anything. Lily leaned forward. There's a cut-off 1/2 mile ahead. It loops back behind them. If we take it, we can double back and lose them in the rocks. Elias glanced over his shoulder. You sure? I grew up running these badlands, she said. Trust me. He nodded once and let her call the turns. They left the main trail, hooves clattering on loose shale, and slipped into a hidden slot canyon so tight the horse's stirrups scraped rock on both sides. The sound of the posse faded behind them. An hour later they emerged on a high ledge overlooking the prairie. Far below, Harlan's men were still riding hard along the wrong trail, dust rising in a long, angry line. Caleb let out a shaky laugh. We did it! Lily didn't smile. For now. Elias kept his eyes on the distant riders. We bought maybe 6 hours, enough to rest the horses and eat something hot. He looked at Lily, the girl's face streaked with dust and exhaustion. You did good back there, real good. She shrugged, but he caught the small flicker of pride in her eyes. For the first time since they'd broken her out, she looked less like a frightened girl and more like someone who might actually survive this. Elias turned his horse north again, wondering how many more times that look would cost her before they reached the border. Chapter 9. They made camp in a shallow cave just as the sun dipped behind the badlands. Elias built a small fire, barely enough to heat beans and coffee, while Caleb stood watch on the ridge. Lily sat close to the flames, arms wrapped around her knees, staring into the coals like they held answers. You should sleep, Elias told her quietly. We ride before first light. She didn't look up. I keep seeing that rope, the way it swung from the gallows in the wind, like it was waiting for me. Her voice cracked on the last word. Elias stirred the beans with a stick. Seeing it and feeling it are 2 different things. You're on the right side of that rope now. Lily finally met his eyes. You felt it, haven't you? The rope. Or something close. He was quiet for a long moment. Once. They had me in a cell in Abilene, noose already tied. My own brother was the one who put me there. Elias gave a bitter smile. Harlan always did have a sense of humor. Footsteps crunched outside. Caleb slipped in, rifle across his chest. Riders, maybe 5 miles back, moving slow, like they're searching every canyon. Elias stood and kicked dirt over the fire. The cave went black. Then we don't sleep tonight. We ride dark. Stay close, stay quiet. The border's still a long way off, and Harlan's the kind of man who doesn't quit just because the sun goes down. He looked at both of them, faces pale in the starlight. Neither do I. Chapter 10. The border town of Crossings looked like a promise nobody intended to keep. A scattering of adobe buildings huddled against the Rio Grande, lanterns flickering like dying fireflies. Elias led them down the single street just before dawn, every muscle in his body screaming from 3 days without real sleep. Lily rode beside him now, eyes hollow but still sharp. "We made it," she whispered, almost afraid to say it out loud. "Not yet," Elias said. "We need papers, fresh horses, and a boat across the river before Harlan crosses the county line." Caleb pointed toward a low cantina. "I know a man inside. He forges documents for anyone with enough coin." They tied the horses in the alley and stepped into the smoky room. The forger, a thin Mexican with ink-stained fingers, looked up from his table. His eyes widened when he saw Elias. "Madre de Dios, I thought the devil was dead." "Devil's just tired," Elias muttered. He dropped a small leather pouch on the table. 2 sets of papers, one for the girl, one for her brother. Make them clean. While the man worked, Lily leaned close to Elias. "What about you? You're not coming with us, are you?" Elias stared at the river through the open doorway, the water black and slow. "My fight doesn't cross that border. Harlan's still breathing. I finish what I started here." Lily's hand found his arm. "You don't have to die for me. I ain't dying for you, girl." He looked down at her, voice low. "I'm dying for the man I promised my wife I'd never be again." He gently pulled his arm free as the forger slid 2 folded papers across the table. "Now get across that river before sunup. Some debts can't be paid in coin." The forger's pen scratched across the paper one last time before he slid the documents over. "They'll pass any border check, senor. But your brother? He crossed the river 2 hours ago with 6 men. They're waiting on the other side." Elias went still, Lily's face drained of color. Caleb's hand dropped to his pistol. "How'd he get ahead of us?" "Shortcut through the desert," the forger shrugged. "He knows these trails better than most." Elias stared at the dark river. The water looked peaceful, but he knew what waited beyond it. Harlan had always been 1 step ahead, even when it seemed impossible. "Change of plans," he said quietly. "You 2 cross here, right now. Take the small skiff tied at the dock. I'll draw him off." Lily grabbed his sleeve. "You can't face him alone." "I've been facing him alone my whole life," Elias answered. He looked at Caleb. "Get your sister across. Don't stop moving till you're 50 miles north. Don't look back." He turned toward the door, the old gun heavy on his hip. Lily's voice followed him into the street, soft and breaking. "Elias." He didn't answer. The river whispered behind him as he walked toward the crossing, boots steady on the dusty road. Somewhere in the dark on the other side, his brother was waiting, and this time only one of them was riding back. Chapter 11. Elias walked straight into the river, water rising cold around his boots, then his knees, then his waist. On the far bank, lanterns bobbed like yellow eyes. Harlan's voice drifted across the water, calm and mocking. "Come on over, little brother. Let's finish what we started back in Willow Creek." Elias kept moving, rifle held high, coat floating around him like a shroud. When he stepped onto Mexican soil, 6 rifles clicked, all pointed at his chest. Harlan stood in the middle, star still pinned to his coat even here. "You burned my town," Harlan said. "Cost me everything." "You stole from your own people," Elias answered. "Hanged an innocent girl to cover it. We're both past saving." Harlan laughed once, short and bitter. "Always thought you were better than me. Turns out we're just the same man wearing different clothes." Elias dropped his rifle. The metal hit the dirt with a dull thud. "Maybe, but I'm done riding with the devil." His hand moved toward his holster. Gunfire tore the night apart. When the smoke cleared, 5 of Harlan's men lay dead. Harlan stood alone, blood spreading across his shirt, staring at the hole Elias had put through his chest. Elias walked forward until they were face to face. "Tell Ma I tried." Harlan coughed, smiling through red teeth. "She always liked you best." Then he fell. Elias stood over his brother's body, the river rushing behind him, and felt nothing. No victory, no peace, just the same emptiness he'd carried for 10 years. He looked back across the water. Lily and Caleb were already gone, small figures disappearing into the Mexican night. He'd bought their freedom with blood. Again. Now he had to figure out how to live with what it cost. Chapter 12. Elias stood alone on the riverbank as the first light of dawn touched the water. Harlan's body lay at his feet, 6 dead men scattered around him like broken promises. The gun in his hand suddenly felt heavier than the whole world. He looked north, toward the faint dust trail where Lily and Caleb had disappeared. They were safe now. That was supposed to mean something. It didn't. A soft sound behind him made him turn. Lily stood there, alone, the first rays of sun catching her hair. She'd sent Caleb ahead and come back. "You didn't have to finish it this way," she said quietly. Elias holstered the gun with shaking fingers. Some men only understand one language. She stepped closer. "And what language do you understand, Elias Crow?" He looked at her, really looked, seeing the girl who'd survived everything he'd dragged her through. For the first time in 10 years, the darkness inside him felt a little smaller. "I'm still figuring that out," he admitted. Lily held out her hand. "Then figure it out with us. There's land south of here, good land. No one knows your name. You could be someone new." Elias stared at her hand for a long moment. The river kept rushing past, carrying away everything he used to be. Slowly, he reached out and took it. They turned together and walked away from the bodies, away from the border, away from the man he'd been. Behind them, the sun rose clean and bright, painting the river gold, as if even the water had decided to forgive what the land never could. The West would remember Elias Crow as a killer, but out here, where the map ran out, he was finally free to forget.